Chapter 1. After spending the summer working 10-hour shifts, 4 days a week, I was used to waking early. Now that school had started, I didn't have to be to work until 8 o'clock. Plus, since Devon had to be up early in order to be at my folks' place by 5 to start the day on the farm, I had more reasons to get up than to stay in bed. He had wanted me to sleep in, but I couldn't let my new fiancé leave for work without saying goodbye. That particular Monday morning, I sent Devon off to work, and I was catching up on local happenings after having been out of town for almost 2 weeks. The picture on the news bulletin was a surprise. Without reading a word, the face staring back at me caught my attention. I knew her, or I once had. Annette Beigler, Annie to her friends, had been in my class all the way through school. We hadn't been best friends, but we'd been friendly. Since then, I'd seen her around town enough to say hi now and then, but I hadn't spent any time with her since the summer we'd graduated, almost 10 years earlier. She'd gone away to school, and though she'd returned, we'd never really rekindled our relationship. I scanned the headlines, trying to figure out why her picture was there. Body of local girl found on campus. The headline shocked me. Today would to be my first day back to work after more than a week, and I knew nothing about a body having been found on campus. Since I was the dean of students' secretary, I should probably know something. I read further and found that she'd been discovered beaten and stabbed. She hadn't been killed there, but her body had been dumped after she was already dead. The police had few leads. Glancing at the clock, I picked up my personal communication device, also known as a PCD, and dialed my brother. I hoped that as a police officer, he would be able to tell me more. I also knew anything he did tell me would be accurate, not rumors or twisted to be more sensational, like often happened with the news. "Hey sis. It's awful early, isn't it?" Rain answered, his voice sounded tired. "Sorry, I hoped I hadn't woken him. I just found out about Annie. Can you tell me anything other than what was in the news?" "Not much," I heard him take a deep breath and let it out slowly. "I know you knew her." His voice was full of sympathy. "We were friends in high school, but we hadn't seen much of each other since. A student found her body on Central Campus yesterday afternoon. That area's pretty deserted on the weekend. You know what it's like. We don't know exactly how long she was there before she was discovered, but not more than a few hours. We figure whoever dumped her wanted her to be found, but probably not until this morning." I knew what he meant. The campus was long and narrow, a block wide but 3 long. Each block was identified by location. There was North, Central, and South Campus. Any ideas who could have done it? I wanted to know as much as he could tell me. Noise rustled over the line, and I assumed he was shaking his head. "No. She was severely beaten and stabbed several times, but we haven't found the primary scene, and we don't have any leads yet." He sounded unhappy about it, and I didn't blame him. Violent crimes weren't common in the area. I mean, yeah, there were domestic disputes and the occasional bar fight, but something like murder? The last murder I remembered in the valley was more than 5 years earlier. This was going to shake the entire community. I know there are things the department holds back, keeps from the public, things that will help you find and identify whoever is responsible, but is there anything else you can tell me? Not that. He stopped mid-sentence and changed what he was saying. "Wait. You know she's one of you, right?" "One of me?" I was confused. "You know, like you and Devon." "Oh." I suddenly realized what he was trying to say, without actually saying, that is. Annie was Kitsune. She was a shapeshifter like I am. No, I didn't know. There are still so many that I haven't yet met. I don't know if it's going to be a factor, but I have to keep it in mind, even if I can't tell the rest of the force. His voice was full of reluctance and doubt. I knew that having to hide something about the victim from the rest of the investigators was hard for him, but I didn't see how it could be helped, at least not now. "I understand." My mind was already churning with possibilities. I'll keep my ears open and let you know if I hear anything that might help. I'd appreciate it. You sound tired. I changed the subject. I am. I ended up pulling a double, investigating this. I just got home and I'm on my way to bed. I'm sorry. I'll let you get some sleep. I felt bad for keeping him up. He had to be exhausted. No, I know she was your friend and you'll hear a different side of her life than I will. You might be able to help me out here, he sighed, but not now, I'm exhausted. I need some sleep before I can process anymore. Get some rest, I'll talk to you later. We hung up and I typed a quick message to Devon, telling him that there had been a body found on campus the day before and I might be late getting home. He'd told me he would be on a tractor most of the day, and I knew he likely wouldn't hear his PCD ring if I called, but this way the message would be waiting the next time he checked them. Even though it was still a little early, I finished getting ready and went to my job. I knew there would be a pile of paperwork to catch up on, and because of the murder, even more. Arriving at the office, I discovered the dean, Mr. Willoughby, was already in his office, engrossed in paperwork. I let him know I was there, then got started on the stack that had built up on my desk while I was gone. I spent the day trying to get caught up with everything that had happened over the last 2 weeks, but it was difficult to concentrate with the constant calls from the media, as well as local people, wanting to know details about the body found on campus. When the first call came in, I checked with Mr. Willoughby for the official response, and afterward told the callers the same thing. I'm sorry, Eastern Arizona College cannot comment on ongoing police investigations. Please contact the Safford Thatcher Police Department for more information. A few reporters were persistent and tried to get me to say more, but I repeated myself until they gave up. I'm not sure I'd ever been happier to see 5 o'clock arrive so that I could leave. I hadn't made much progress on getting caught up, and the constant ring of incoming calls had me down to my last nerve. I got home and made my way up the stairs to my third-floor apartment, expecting Devon to be there, only to find the place empty. I checked the electronic lock panel next to the door. The entry log said no one had been inside since I'd left that morning. I frowned, wondering where Devon was as I started toward the bedroom to change out of my suit. As I turned toward the bedroom, I spotted a piece of paper on the floor near the door. After the last thing I'd found under my door, I wasn't sure I really wanted to know what this was, but I picked it up anyway. It was a printout of the news article I'd read that morning about Annie, but someone had slashed "should have been you" across the front with a red marker. Rolling my eyes, I set it on the table next to the door and went to change clothes. I peeled out of my suit and hung it up. I was still standing in my underwear, flipping through the clothes hanging in the closet, trying to find something to wear, when I heard the front door open. I froze. I scented the air and caught the smoky fragrance that was Devon, but I wasn't sure if it was from him coming in or a remnant from him sleeping in my bed. I really needed to learn to differentiate between old scents and fresh ones. "Nick?" Devon's voice called from the living room. I let out the breath I'd been holding and went back to looking for something to wear. "In here," I called back, pulling a sundress off a hanger. I quickly pulled it over my head and, still tugging it down, went to see him. He stood just inside, frowning down at the threatening note. "Where did this come from?" "I found it inside the door when I came in. You're later than I expected. I thought you'd be here when I got home." He looked up. "I got hung up at your folks, then I stopped and picked up dinner." He lifted the bag still hanging from one hand. "I don't like this. I'm not real crazy about it, but what are we gonna do? I refuse to be terrorized or intimidated by people too cowardly to identify themselves." He sighed. "Will you at least agree to be careful? The idea that what happened to Annie could happen to you scares me." He looked back down at the paper with its angry red markings. I watched him for a second, then sighed. "I won't do anything stupid. I'll watch out and avoid situations where I could be taken unaware, but I can't let these threats rule my life." I don't expect you to, I just want you to be careful. Have you at least told the Aniquitos about it? Aniquitos is what we call our pack leaders, at least among the kitsune who become wolves. Bill, our Aniquitos, has been a friend of my family for years. He's is like a second father to me. Knowing and trusting him had helped my transition when I discovered the kitsune and that I am one. I shook my head. I haven't had a chance. I've been home less than 10 minutes. Devon looked at me expectantly. I'll tell him, just not right now. All right then. Content that I would let our pack leader know about the newest threat, he dropped the paper back onto the table and headed for the kitchen. You ready to eat? It'll be better while it's still hot. Sure. I followed him. Chinese smells great, super wok, I assume? Of course. We ate while discussing our day. He'd spent most of his repairing a fence through which several of my father's cattle had escaped. I told him about mine, how frustrating I had found trying to work while constantly fielding calls from reporters. The whole thing with Annie has me in shock. We grew up together, were in the same class most of the way through school, even played tennis together in high school. I'm sorry. He laid one hand over mine on the small table. I didn't know her. I knew who she was, I recognized her on sight, but being older, I never spent any time with her. I nodded, appreciating his sympathy but understanding what he meant by not knowing her. The only reason he'd known me in high school was because he'd hung out with my sister Payson, who'd been in his class. That this would happen around here, and that she would be left on campus, bothers me. It's almost like she was left somewhere directly connected to you. I looked at him a moment, thinking about the possibility. Had Annie been killed as a message to me? Or was it just a coincidence that she had been dumped on campus? Was the note from her killers, or just the group that had been harassing us using it to their advantage? So many possibilities that I had no answers for. I don't want to think about it anymore tonight. Let's go watch some screen and relax. I've been dealing with this all day and I need a break. I stood to clean up after dinner. All right. Together, we headed into the living room to spend the evening together.